Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Hey, Brian. Welcome.
Hey, Sue. Thank you. How are you? I'm great. It's a good day.
It is a good day. It is. So, you know what? We might as well just dive right in. You were a teacher turned entrepreneur. So, how'd you get from one to the other?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. My mom was a teacher and my dad was a chemical engineer. And so just growing up, I just decided to lean that way. I was really artistic, creative, but my parents were like, we're not going to pay you to go to art school, which I respect. And then I learned that I could teach. So I enjoyed teaching a lot. I spent like 10 years in college. I got a bachelor's and then I got two master's degrees so I could teach where I wanted to teach, which is a lot. But I taught graphic design and web design. I've been full-time for the last 14 years. So I got to be creative, but also, there's the technical side of that, which I really enjoyed as well. And then after 14 years of that, I just kind of got tired of it, right? A lot of shifts in my mindset have occurred. I'm now 48 and, unfortunately both my parents suffered some mental decline in their late 60s, and that kind of reframe some things for me. And I decided that, being 48, rather than just go teach another year, I wanted to go out on my own and try some things on my own and prove to myself what I'm capable of, as opposed to just doing the tried and true, which I'd done for the last, 14, 15 years.
And I know you had a podcast as well, and now you're doing stuff on Amazon. Talk a little
Yeah.
bit about the podcast and Amazon. Did you consider other things along the way? And like, what was your process of elimination?
No, it's great. I'm kind of a serial side hustler in a way because the podcast was just fun for me, right? My first podcast was an interview-based podcast where I talked to local artists in Houston. I'm in Houston, Texas, and it wasn't very long, but it was great in the community. It was nice. And then I started playing some tabletop games with my son, and I created a podcast based on a game. And it was like 34 episodes of that. And it had a little following as well, but that was all just fun. But for me, always creating, right? So I had the podcast and I did all the social media for the podcast. And I created a website through WordPress for the podcast. And I enjoyed that part of it.
Sounds like me.
Yeah, exactly. No, I know what you're doing. I love seeing your work because it's very
Thanks.
familiar to me. So
And you know what? I love doing it too. I love the podcast and everything else. Yeah.
it's good. And Amazon kind of came to be because I wanted to try something. It was time for the next side hustle. I wasn't sure what it was, and I was going to lean into Etsy because Etsy is a lot of creative, right? You're designing things, you're building things, and you're selling it. And so I bought a course on Etsy, and I was ready to go. All the while in my Twitter community, Amazon kept popping up again and again and again. And all these younger people than me, but all these hustlers are out there doing and making it look really easy. And sometime in like late December, I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. And things have just steamrolled, right? It's interesting. So I started officially selling in January, and I just had my best month ever, crossing
Wow.
almost nearly $12,000 in revenue, which is great. And it's just been
Congrats.
fun. And I love it because it's learning new things. I've always enjoyed that. And so on top of that, I'm not podcasting, but I have a YouTube channel where I'm posting things I've learned along the way. The teacher in me is still there, and so I like to just show people like, hey, here's some pitfalls early on. Here's some things that I encountered, and that's gotten some response too. So Amazon's been fun. I don't know if it's a thing I'll be doing, 5 years from now, but for now, it's interesting because I'm having enough success where I feel like there is a path forward on it.
Oh, that sounds really fascinating. I mean, even teachers, and I'm a former teacher too, you just really never stop teaching. It just always stays a part of your DNA and translates into whatever it is you go to pursue. So, for your Amazon store, I'm very curious. So, talk about like what do you sell? How did you decide to sell it? What does that end look like? Because I know nothing about it, and I'm sure there's many listening that have no idea either.
Right? It's amazing how the business works, right? If you're just if you're someone that just goes and shops on Amazon, you find an item and you click the little buy now button, and that's it. But I've learned so much about it because I used to think that everything was sold from Amazon. Like Amazon is this company and they sell you things, but that's not true. The vast majority of items on there are being provided by a third party, which is what I am now. And so right now I'm selling a little bit of everything. So there's three primary models for Amazon. There's private label, meaning you have your own product, you've designed it, you've packaged it, you sell it. There's wholesale, so you're dealing with large quantities from a distributor or a brand direct, and then you're selling it on Amazon. Or there's what I'm currently doing, which is simply arbitrage. So you're buying things low and you're selling them high. So you're finding deals either in retail, so out on the street, or online. You're buying little bits of everything and trying to make a buck. And so right now, I'm going wide, Sue. I'm anything and everything, right? I've a whole bunch of Nike and Adidas apparel, tools, pet supplies, art supplies, anything I think I can make a profit on right now, I'm doing. I will
Okay.
eventually niche down, but sometimes it's just too easy. Not it's not easy, but it's just too good to pass up an opportunity where something's on sale a lot or there's a clearance. And yet, that's what's fascinating to me is because I can buy a makeup item per se. And again, I know nothing about makeup, right? But I can buy a makeup item from the brand's website for $4, and people on Amazon will pay $16 for it, right? So,
Wow. Okay.
but why would they do that, right? They would do that because of the ease of Amazon. They know that if they click that button, it's going to show up within 1 day or 2 days, and they don't have to think about it anymore. So they value their time perhaps more than their money. But yeah.
Okay, so now I'm even more curious. So that let's follow the makeup example. So you find it for $4 on the product's website, and then how does it get from, or I don't know if this is too technical or if you
No,
even
it's
want to
it's
answer, but
I
how
love
does
talking
it
about
get
it.
from, oh, okay,
Right.
great. So you bought it from,
Right.
animalcosmetics.com. I've just made that up. And then what happens to it? How does it get to the Amazon
Right.
warehouse
So
and then
here's
I buy your product for $16?
So, okay, I'll try to keep this not too boring, but it's exciting to me, right? So
It's
I buy it for
exciting to me too.
$4, right? They send it all to me. I buy like 8 at a time, and so that's fine. And then when the product gets to me through my Amazon account, I will put a label on each one that directs back to my store. So they know that when they scan it in their fulfillment centers, it belongs to me. And so I have to label each one of those, and then I box it back up and ship it to Amazon. And Amazon will tell me where they want it. They'll be like, send it to Fort Worth, send it to New Jersey, send it to California. But I mail it in. And then once they get it, they check it in, and then someone can go to buy it, and then they will fulfill it. So my product may end up in Jersey, and someone off the East Coast orders it, then it gets shipped there. One thing that you don't know, however, is like that makeup product may have 2, 5, 10, 15 different sellers all selling the same thing on
Mm.
Amazon. So when you click that buy now button, you're not actively choosing the seller you're buying from. Amazon is doing their massive calculation on which store has that product closest to the end user. So, for instance, if I'm in Texas and my product is in New Jersey and someone buys it in California, I'm probably not going to get the buy box because my product is across the nation. So if someone has that same product local, they're probably going to get it. So the buy box actually rotates. So it's interesting. You would never think about it. I never thought about it before on Amazon. I just clicked the button, but that button is changes all the time, and the price structure on Amazon changes all the time. That piece of makeup I sold today, I sold one for 16.20. Yesterday, I sold one for 15.88. The day before, I sold it for 12.92. So a lot of these items, the price literally fluctuates
And
quite actively.
do you set, then obviously you don't set the price then. Is Amazon figuring the price, or is there like a minimum where you'd say, "Hey, I don't want you to sell this thing under
You
$10," or
can control all that. Yes, you can. You can set like
okay,
a range
a range,
and things
okay.
like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but it's
Ah,
it's
okay.
it's fascinating to see how it works, right? It's interesting.
Yeah, I find so. How did you learn all this?
Twitter, there's some young energetic people. I don't want to say kids, but young
Yeah,
20s, and they've been doing this for a couple of years. Or they got into it during the pandemic, and they share their content. They make videos all the time, and it's great. And of course, a lot of them sell courses or communities, which we all know how that is. But it's been really good. They've been very very open and sharing, and so that's also why I started sharing from the get go. From the very beginning, I started recording videos about like, hey, I'm brand new. I'm 48. I'm doing this. This is what we're learning. And yeah, you can really truly learn it all on the internet if you want. It's pretty easy.
well, I'll make sure I put your YouTube link in the show notes so that it sends people to your videos that they can
Sure.
watch and learn too. What's the one thing that you thought would be really hard about selling on Amazon? Turns out it wasn't. And what's something that you thought would be easy and wound up being hard?
Oh, that's a great question. I think just getting started and like understanding, like I have this product, let's say it's that piece of makeup. How am I going to get that to a customer? And I have to, somehow figure out logistics, how to get it into Amazon. And it turns out like I can almost do that in my sleep at this point. It's not nothing, but it becomes so ingrained in the process. It's just a series of steps, and so it's easy. It's time consuming, And any seller will tell you it's like the least profitable part of your day is when you're it's called prepping the product because you're not buying new products. So it's time consuming, and that's something that usually gets, you send it to someone else at some point. You hire other people to do that for you. What I th- so that was good. What I thought was, let's see, dealing I'm still I'm an introvert, and the thought of dealing directly with customers still makes me nervous, right? I've sold on eBay for 2 decades, but I'm always nervous when I ship a product directly to the customer. Are they going to like it? Are they going to send it back? Am I going to
Mhm.
screw up the shipping? I still get anxious about that, which is why I ship most of my stuff to Amazon. Then it's hands off me. And so, like right now, we're gearing up for Q4. So the last 3 months of the year are big spend, and it's faster if you can ship it directly to the client, but that gives me anxiety because I'm not confident in doing that, even though it seems like it's simple. But for me, it's just like, oh, am I using a big enough box? Is this too small of a box? How much is this going to weigh? And that's still a struggle for me dealing with
So
that.
that is an option then. Like, you actually physically have the product and you get the address and you send it to the customer. I would n
Absolutely.
I would not even have thought that was an option on Amazon. You just
Right.
always see Amazon Prime and off it goes.
Right. So next time you buy something from Amazon, it arrives. If it's not in a prime box, maybe it's in kind of a generic box or a generic polybag mailer, then that's probably coming from a third party vendor. Now, when we buy stuff for our house, it comes in. I can pretty much identify that it's from a third party. So I'm like, oh, it's one of me, right? I understand exactly how this ended up here. So that's pretty fun.
Oh, that's interesting. What made you decide on the Amazon versus something else? Did you consider other side hustles other than
Yeah.
Amazon?
No, right. And like I said, I was really interested in Etsy and creating
Oh,
things.
right, right.
I was going to leverage AI, which is all AI is one of the things that actually drove me from my job because I teach graphic design, and AI is
Mhm.
making that more difficult for actual people to land jobs. And so I was like, well, I can't beat it. So let me use it and see if I could do stuff. Because I still love the idea of creating. I've been an artist in a former life. I've made paintings and stuff. So I like that idea. But something about the automation of Amazon and something about you don't have to deal with customers if you don't choose to, right? You can just send it all to Amazon and Amazon will send it. And then Amazon's going to deal with any kind of problems with the customer. There's something about that, again, the introvert in me really liked. And so I paid for a course in Etsy. I'm still going to complete that course at some point because I am interested in that. I still love the idea of making products and getting them to people that really enjoy your work. And
Mm,
Amazon, there's none of that. There's no personality in what I'm doing in Amazon, right? It's
mhm.
just all products.
Yeah, there's just so much stuff out there. I keep thinking of the shiny object syndrome, how
Oh
there's
yeah,
just
yeah,
so
yeah.
many things out there for people. How do you even narrow down what
It
it
is,
is
and I
that you want to do? But I can see where you leaned into your creative side and you love to learn things and processes and then not dealing with customers and how Amazon kinda fits your buy box, so to
right.
speak,
It
that's
does, thank you.
something that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
wanna do.
It does, and also,
So
like,
I can see that.
think of, like, we talk about superpowers and our abilities, right? I come to a real estate deal, and I don't know where I can contribute because I have no idea, but I've been building websites for over 20 years, right? And I've been in that space. I've been teaching people how to build websites, and I'm just so familiar with that space. So e-commerce was something I was looking at from the very beginning. Like,
Mhm.
if I have to own a brick and mortar store or dealing with actual people face to face, that makes me uncomfortable. But on a website, that's something that fits me very well. So I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, you make a good point. Entrepreneurship in its different forms isn't for everybody. We hear a lot of talk today about, oh, go buy a business, go buy a laundromat. You'll hear Cody Sanchez, who I absolutely adore and
Yeah.
love her, like go buy a boring business. And she's absolutely right. But that's not for everybody. If you don't want to do customer service or you're not able to go out to that actual laundromat and do that, you're either going to have to pay somebody or do something for it. So, uh, I guess the point is, if you're considering entrepreneur, like you said, look for the buy box, look for your personalities, look for who you are, look for something that matches you. And not everybody's a risk taker. Some people are, some people aren't, and that's okay. Doesn't matter where you are. Just pick something.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think there's room for growth, right? I mean,
Sure.
you're podcasting now, right? Can you imagine when in your life you thought you'd be podcasting, right? So
Never.
there's all right. So there's space to grow, but I think what you were saying about working kind of in your lane to begin with, I think is a great start. The other thing about like Amazon is that I can do it all by myself, right? I don't need anyone to help me with this particular job, but I also realize that I'm building myself a job. And what we all want to do is eventually like own the business or be an investor in the business, but not be in the business. And so, this has been a fun education for me, but I also need to think in terms of scale and how I can actually kind of
Mhm.
remove myself from it. And many Amazon sellers have been able to do that. And so it's just finding them and learning from them because I don't want to retire from one job, so to speak, and then just land myself another job, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point too. Instead of working in the job, find somebody to work on the job. But I've also heard it said too, like you're doing exactly what you should be doing. You're working in the job so that you understand the job. So as you transition off of that to have others take your place, then you understand what they have to do. And I think when people enter into entrepreneurship, they forget that you have to start working in the job first, and you have to probably work a whole bunch of different roles too before you can actually go into the working on the job instead of just in the job and starting there. So it's a good
yeah,
point that you bring up.
100%. And I think both
Yeah.
both in like the Amazon sphere and then even in real estate, a lot of people lean on like virtual assistants and they're like, "Oh, this I'm going to have my VA do it." But someone's got to teach the VA how to do it. So you have to
Right.
know, right? They're never going to be as good as you. But so you have to know how to teach them. And so yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You've got to learn it first and then you can be able to teach someone how to do it and then hopefully you can step away and focus on other things.
Yeah, instead of just doing it all yourself. And you know what? Scaling's a skill. Not everybody knows how to scale their business. And so I think you mentioned about finding the people to help you where you are right now. And then as you get bigger, you're going to find those people to help you do the next steps. So I think that's
Exactly.
another small step to throw in there. Look at people who are very successful and have built big businesses. But if you're an entrepreneur at ground zero, you're right where you're supposed to be. And,
Yes.
you just keep
No, I
going
agree.
up from there. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm like 8, 9 months in to Amazon, and I remember the day I got my first sale, which was like amazing. I remember the day I first had $100 sold in a day, and that was amazing. And now, I'm well beyond that. But I follow through the Twitter community. There are people that have come behind me, and they're just making their first sale. I love that. I reach out to them, and because I've been there, right? And I know for me, I'm part of some paid Discord groups because young kids in their Discord, right? But there are sellers that have been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years, and they are very successful. And these are the people that I'm going to lean on to scale because they've clearly done it. And so,
Mhm.
relying on their knowledge, they're making themselves available as part of this group. I'm paying for that access,
Mhm.
but that's kind of my plan, right? I no longer need them to tell me how to get started, but I do need some advice on how do I get from this point to the next point to the next point.
Right, right. To learn, sometimes you have to pay people and to invest in your education. There's nothing more valuable than investing in your education, whether it's mindset coaching, personal coaching, business coaching, paying to be in the room because and some of these costs like $5,000 or $10,000. But if the return on the investment is greater than what you spend, then it's totally worth it to put you in somebody else's space. So I think that's exciting.
Yes, and we've talked about this in person, but it's like my mindset from being a college professor who, his parents were middle class and did everything they could for me, but it's just like go to college, get your job, then retire when you're 65. And then where it is now, it's like, yes, I'm confident in spending thousands of dollars on a course if I can see the return. Whereas 2 years
Mhm.
ago, I would not have spent thousands of dollars on a course. So 100%, right? The mindset is such a tricky thing, and that's something I know I'm working on and will continue to work on. But it's been
Ho
a lot of fun.
Yeah, mindset is just so important. What are some things that you do to help work on your mindset? As you mentioned, 2 years ago, you wouldn't even thought of doing paid coaching or courses for anything. How did you get from there, to where you are today?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I think it started for me just listening to podcasts, even stuff like Bigger Pockets and learning what real estate was, and then you stumble into like tribal millionaires, right? And then you learn about GoBundance, and you keep hearing people talk about that. And you're like, what is that? And that sounds like something for just a bunch of rich people. And then an opportunity like Emerge shows up, which I know that's how we
Mhm,
met. And
mhm,
you just get in the room with people who think how you want to think, right? And
mhm,
so like I don't have any of those connections at the school I taught or my friends around me, like none of that. And so finding a tribe or a group of people that are going to challenge you and let you see things differently, I think is super important. And so that's what I've learned to do is through Emerge, and I've joined Brian Lubin's Action Academy and joining paid Discord groups for people that are experts in Amazon, just that finding that community of people that are going to think differently than I grew up thinking is such a big thing. And then having some small successes along the way, right? Yeah, just doing deals that I never thought possible, investing in things that I never thought possible, and then having a regular pod. So in Emerge, we
Mhm.
have a group, and I've chatted pretty much every Wednesday night with the same three other people since October, and it's just been amazing to have that consistent group of people that we're all thinking the same. We're all thinking big. We're all doing big things. We're taking big swings. And that's something that didn't exist for me 2 years ago. So
Mhm.
it's been great.
Yeah, who you're around determines where you go. What are some of those small steps that you've taken that have been turning into bigger results for you?
Yeah, I think, yes, I needed accountability. And so sometimes that's these pod calls, it's showing up. Sometimes like I'm worried about my health because of just how my parents ended up and I need to get healthier. And it's like, okay, I could go to the gym. I'm not much of a gym person, but I'll start going to the gym. But for me, it's like, no, I need to do more than that. And so I invest in a trainer, which I've never worked out with a trainer before, but now I go twice a week with a trainer and he gets paid. But that's the accountability I need. So finding little nuggets that are going to keep me going like that is really, really helpful. I'm also just driven by learning. So I love the opportunity to learn new things. And so that shiny object syndrome is very real, Sue. We know that. And so, there's something about that. And so what I'm trying to do, on the advice of my coach, I just reread Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he said a lot of great things in there, but one was like the idea of motion versus action. And motion is like his example was like if you're outlining articles to write for your blog, that's motion. But if you're actually sitting down and writing the articles, that's action. And
Mm,
so much of my life is spent in motion, where I'm listening to podcasts or I'm reading about things or I'm watching YouTube. And I feel like that's preparing me for something, but that's not the action. And so what I'm trying to do, my little small habit is every time I read a book or I listen to maybe not just one podcast, but let's say I listen to a series of podcasts, try to implement something. So instead of taking it from theory to take it into practice. And so it can be a very small thing, but just trying to implement something into my life or into my business, because otherwise I'm just constantly in motion and there's just not
mhm,
enough action going on.
mhm. What do you think holds you back or might hold people back from taking the action versus the motion?
Fear, 100%. Fear of failure. I think that's it. And I'm also a recovering perfectionist, Sue, like you are. I've heard you admit that several times. I mean, it's scary sometimes, right?
What do
It's
you mean
scary.
recovering? I'm still
Well,
doing it.
okay, we're getting better, but it's just different, right?
Yeah,
I've let go of what are people going to think of me, and like what happens if I fail, and those are important questions, but at some point you'll never succeed if you don't try. And
right.
so I that's affected my parenting, right? Because now I look at my kids and I'm like, hey, let's try that, or let's do this, let's try that, and I'm trying to encourage them to take action and not just consume, 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 but do something. So even with my
Mhm,
son, he watches a lot of videos of kids playing Minecraft, which is a thing, I guess. But I said you should stream yourself, and I helped him set up the stream, and so now he streams. He's 13, but he
mhm,
streams on the weekends playing Minecraft, and that's creating skills. Like he knows how to set up his computer to record. He knows how to what a Discord. There's all these other things that are great,
yeah.
but he just needed to take that action as opposed to just consuming. He's now creating. And those are the opportunities that I look for. But fear, I think fear, you're just afraid of failure. And I've learned to
Yeah.
embrace failure. Failure takes you one
Fail
step closer to success.
Hey, failure is a good thing. Fail fast, fail hard. And one thing about what people think, you mentioned about fear of failure and fear of what people think. And there's two sides to that. The fear we go to is, well, what are they going to think if my business failed? I think those are the fears that are unwarranted. But you want to be a person of integrity. You want to be a person of honesty. You want to be a person who is somebody you would want to talk to, right? So I think a healthy fear of those things are good, but it's the fear we go to is, well, what are they going to think of me if I fail on this? What are they going to say if I didn't live up to and sell all that stuff that I said I was going to do? And once you let those fears go, then you can say, I'm not going to give into that garbage. 'cause it doesn't
Yes,
matter what people think. It was very freeing for you.
right. And like I said, I'm older, I'm 48, and so it's taken me a long time to get there, but it's very liberating to be like, "Hey, I'm not gonna worry about these things anymore," right?
Yeah,
Or
right.
take those challenges. I think it's really,
Wait.
really important if you
I'm
can do
laughing.
that.
Yeah. Wait till you get to 50. I'm
Oh,
51. As soon as
okay.
I turned 50, I went, "I don't care anymore."
There you go, right? It's
Yeah,
amazing.
there's just something about that number where it's just like and it's good. I hope people listening are really encouraged. You're never too old to do anything at all, as long as you are, number 1, breathing, and number 2, have a desire to want to learn. So you're never too old to do any of that kind of stuff. S
Absolutely.
and it can all be challenging. Brian, what's your approach to facing challenges?
Wow, yeah, I usually avoid them at all costs too, honestly. I'm just kidding. I'm getting better. I will say I'm getting better because I would normally like, people will say, "Oh, take on the biggest challenge of the day first," and I would avoid it. I'd put it off, put it off, put it off. And now I'm trying to do that. A little bit kind of embracing a little bit of the one thing, take a challenge and try to block it down into smaller incremental things or,
Mhm,
eating an elephant, that kind of analogy, but just trying to say, "Hey, this is intimidating. This is a big challenge. Let me look at it and see what the steps that are going to be necessary for me to get to that challenge." And then just take that first step. That has helped me. Like even on the Amazon business or like, there's things where it's like, I know this is a multi-step process and it seems intimidating, but let's just simplify it down to the first action that's going to make it better or easier to me to get to the next one. So I think if at all possible, what benefits me is just taking something big and complicated and
mhm.
challenging and just breaking it down into smaller, more easily achievable actions.
That's good. So, you put something off because it was a challenge. What did you learn from putting it off?
You know what? I think in those instances where you finally do it, you finally get it done. It feels so amazing, and you get that rush of satisfaction and adrenaline, and it should help shine a brighter light on the fear you might have about tackling challenging things. Yesterday, I sent my first cold email to a possible distributor for Amazon products. I've been in my head, like, drafting this perfect email for days, Sue, days, but I got it out, and I don't know if I'll hear back, but just the point is I got it out, and so
Mhm.
now I'm gonna send the second one out today, and I'll probably send the third one out the next day, and my goal is to have 12 of them out by next Wednesday
Good for
because
you.
now that that's overcome, I see how easy it is, right? And so,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna worry about it. So, yeah, sometimes you just gotta put your head down and take it out, and so all that advice they say is do the most challenging thing first. I should totally subscribe to that. I don't always do it, but I understand the sentiment of what that is. So, yes.
You brought up a good point about just getting started and just overcoming and just doing the first thing, like you sent that first email out. How much of us just don't do the first thing, and then when we do it, we find out how easy it really was in the first place, and that our fears really weren't warranted. Like, I think we wander through life going, "I don't wanna do that, I don't wanna do that," and then the second you do it, you go, "I'm glad I did that, I'm glad I did that," and we do all this self-talk and convince ourselves that something is difficult to do when in reality it's probably just overcoming a fear that's not even really warranted in the first place and then just going and doing it. Doing the impossible is just doing the uncommon. Something that's a challenge is just uncommon to us. It's not impossible. And I love that when you think about it and you reframe how you're looking at that challenge. It's not impossible because there's somebody out there who's already done it, you know?
I agree. I love that reframe. Yeah, it's just uncommon because, like,
Yeah.
again, 2 years ago, someone would say, "Hey, so this person owns that apartment building." You're like, "What? How does a person own an apartment building?" Right? And then you meet these people and you're like, "Wow, it's uncommon, but it is not
Mhm.
impossible to own an apartment building."
Right.
And so, yeah, I subscribe to that. I like that reframing the impossible because
Mhm.
there are things that I would normally challenge, "That's impossible." But I'm trying to do that in my own life. I'm certainly trying to do it with my kids. If anytime that word comes up, say, "Well, let's think about that. Is it really impossible, or what would we need to do to
Yeah.
do that? What world is it where that is possible?" And let's talk about that. Yeah,
Yeah, the word impossible, if you think about how it's spelled, I am, as in Mary. So if you break that word apart, it's actually I apostrophe am, I'm possible.
love it.
So if you
Yep.
look at the word differently, it goes from impossible to I'm possible.
I like that rework too. That's very good.
Uh-huh. If you could go back in time to your younger self and deliver a message, Brian, what would it be and why?
That's a great question. One of the things I would say is that, your mom and dad, they love you and they're showing you their life. Like they're framing your life based on their own experiences. And I would try to encourage my younger self to say that is one data point, and there are all kinds of other data points out there. So I feel like I wish I would have learned about these communities sooner, but I didn't think to look for them because I just assumed this is what we all do. My mom grew up as a teacher, my dad was an engineer and he retired and then he got sick and then it was all gone. And it's like,
Mm,
man, there's got to be a better way. So that's one of the things I can't go back to myself, but I will absolutely talk to my own kids about it and say, yes, this is your mom and I's path, but this is not the only path. There are lots of different ways to do it, and encourage them to get out and experience and explore some of those different avenues. That's for sure what I would do. The other thing, as a bonus, I had a scarcity mindset. My parents provided; they were such great, right? I was never short for anything, right? That we were provided, but they saved and saved and saved and saved, and money stressed them out. But then they also kind of they didn't get to enjoy it in their later years. And so
mm.
I would try to work on that mindset where I'm working on my scarcity mindset as we speak. I'm still working through that, but I wish I would alleviate that sooner than, late in my 40s. But yeah.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I mean, I think all of us in some capacity do struggle with that scarcity mindset where you never think you have enough. And it's challenging, like you said, to figure out what I'm distracted because you got a cat just jumped up in front of you.
Yeah.
And I'm
Sorry about that.
laughing because no, no, don't apologize. Cause usually my cat is up here as well. She usually comes in and wants to podcast with me. So
Yeah.
totally lost train of thought. And I'll just leave that in there. And that's just it's a pleasant distraction to our day. And we love our animals.
Yeah, we do. We do for sure.
Yep. So, Brian, I ask all my guests, I have my core three. What's one topic or question you wish I would have asked? And how would you have answered that question or expanded on the topic?
That is a great question. And I've heard your podcast a lot. So I should have thought about that a little bit more. I think maybe more like what was the inspiration? What was the deep down inspiration to leave your job? Right. And I think we touched on that. But it was a big decision in my life. And I remember and my wife's an attorney, so I'm not the breadwinner of the family, right? But when the most I've ever made in a year was $72,000. That's my salary as a teacher. But just the nervousness of having to tell my wife, I think it's time. I remember that moment so clearly. We were out at lunch and it took me felt like forever to get the words out of my mouth. Um, and then she immediately said, okay, that sounds great. Let's do it. And it was amazing. And it's just like this relief passed over me. But it's a hard decision. And I know there are people
Mhm.
out there that might be struggling with that and when's the right time. But I would just I would encourage you to take ownership, and you only live once, right? And that's one of the things where it's like, hey, I want to bet on myself just once. I really want to see what I can do and see if I can make more than $72,000 a year because I never have. And that's important. I think sharing that story or having people
Yeah.
understand that you don't have to be in the same job for 40 years, right? And I don't know if anyone would do that anymore, but that's it. That's what I would say. Other than that, I think we covered a lot of great stuff.
Well, I have to ask you then, there had to have been fear with leaving your job, or have you struggled sometimes with wanting to like go back to your W 2?
Yeah, the fear's there. Teaching is its own strange beast because I've never worked a summer because we don't teach in the summer. And so right now, literally this week, both my kids are in school. And so I'm actually at home undisturbed. The other thing is that, I was a college professor and those jobs don't just pop up. You really have to wait for them. So I didn't burn the bridge, but the bridge isn't there. And so, it is that you have to make it work, right? My wife was nice. She's like, I'll give you 2 years. And then after 2 years, then if it's not working out, we may have to pivot. I said, okay, that's fair. So, there's a sense of urgency there
There is
for
no
sure.
other option. When you remove those options and you tell yourself, "You know what? There is no other option. I have to make this work and figure out how to do it," or I pivot to something else, or
Yeah.
but I just figure out how to make that work. And a lot of the stories that I've heard and the people that I've interviewed, basically they say the same thing you do. I started X, Y, or Z because I had no other option. I had to make it work.
Right.
And I think when you eliminate those choices, it demands your focus. it makes you get more focused when you don't have X, Y, and Z that you can run to.
Right.
You know, if
And
you when you've only got one thing, then you're gonna go full on that one thing.
right. And it totally is invigorating because, it's my own making at this point, right? I chose to start this business and I control everything about it within my control, but
Mhm.
it's nice. Like no one's telling me what to do. No one's telling me all these other things. So it's really nice to be able to have that liberty. And I'm fortunate for that.
Yeah, I like the autonomy on that. Sounds very appealing for those who want to be a true entrepreneur. So, book and podcast, you alluded to both, but as a recap, what book had a significant impact and podcast as well?
Lots of books, but I'm gonna go ahead and say Atomic Habits just because it's the one thing I've reread and I've implemented a lot of things in my daily to kind of just improve on those. And that motion versus action thing really struck a chord with me, just kind of called me out. But I know it's a super popular book, but it's definitely worth a reread if you haven't. And podcast, I want to give a shout out to Brian Lubin and the Action Academy. He was in GoBundance and he just brings an authenticity and energy to his podcast and his community, which I'm also a part of. But he works really hard. He has a whole lot of fun doing it, and
Mhm,
I just get a lot of energy listening to him podcast. He releases a new pod every 5 days a week, which is
mhm.
amazing. But
It's
yeah,
a
I want
lot
to
of
give a shout
work.
out to him. Yeah, it's really good. Even though I'm probably older than most of the audience, it's still I feel quite young listening to what he's talking about, and it gives me the confidence I need to go tackle big things. So I like that one.
A yeah, it is. He does have a good podcast. As we close, what's one small step that someone can do today that'll help them change their tomorrow?
I'm gonna. I'm sure it's been said before, but
That's
it is
okay.
as simple as taking action. So if you take nothing else, but think about that motion versus action, and if you're giving up too much time to motion, it's time to take action. And these small little steps will compound. They will absolutely compound. So, if you're reading a book, too many times I've read a book and said that was good, never thought of it again. But if you can read a book and just do one or two small things from that book, I think your world will change pretty quickly.
Perfect. Brian, thanks so much for your time. How can people find your YouTube channel and or reach out to you?
Sure. Yeah. My YouTube channel is Adventures in FBA. FBA stands for Fulfillment by Amazon. So that is pretty easy. Or I'm on Twitter. My Amazon personality is on Twitter. It's just Brian FBA. So if you look up Brian, Brian FBA, you'll find me there. So that'd be great.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.